My fiancée's prenup demanded half my assets, lifetime alimony, and full access to my trust. Then she gave me an ultimatum. Sign it, or the wedding's off. I chose off. The next day, her lawyer called asking if I'd reconsider. Suddenly, the ultimatum didn't seem like such a good idea. Hello, Reddit I plus here. 3 weeks before my wedding, my fiancé handed me a prenup in front of her entire family and said, sign it tonight, or there won't be a wedding. She expected me to panic. She expected me to fold. What she didn't expect was that I made a living finding traps hidden in contracts. And what she definitely didn't expect was that one phone call the next morning would expose a secret her family had spent years hiding. I'm 36, and until recently I was engaged to a 32-year-old woman I'll call Natalie. We'd been together for almost 4 years. From the outside, everything looked perfect. We had the lakefront venue booked, invitations mailed, honeymoon reserved in Italy, and a guest list that had somehow ballooned to nearly 300 people. Natalie came from a wealthy family that loved appearances. Every holiday looked like a magazine spread. Every birthday party felt like a political fundraiser. I got along with them well enough, but there was always an unspoken understanding that I wasn't truly one of them. I came from old money. They came from people who desperately wanted everyone to think they came from old money. There's a difference. 3 weeks before the wedding, Natalie invited me to dinner at her parents' house. I assumed it was another planning meeting. Instead, the moment dessert plates were cleared, she slid a thick folder across the table. Her father smiled. Her mother folded her hands. Her sister avoided eye contact. That's when I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was an ambush. Just a prenup, Natalie said casually. Sign it tonight, and we can finally move on from all this wedding stress. The folder was almost 50 pages. I work in estate law. Reading contracts is literally my profession. The first few pages looked normal enough. Then things got weird. Then they got insane. The agreement stated that if we divorced, Natalie would receive half of everything I owned. Not just assets acquired during marriage. Everything. Properties I'd owned before meeting her. Investments, retirement accounts, family holdings. Everything. I kept reading. The next section required permanent spousal support equal to 35% of my annual income. For life. Even if she remarried, even if she became wealthier than me, even if she left me, then I reached the section that made my stomach drop. It involved my family's trust. My grandfather established the trust decades ago. The assets inside it don't legally belong to me. I benefit from it, but I don't control it. The agreement demanded that within 30 days of marriage, I grant Natalie full access to every trust account associated with my family. That wasn't merely unreasonable, it was impossible. I physically could not do what the contract required. The trust documents specifically prohibited spouses from accessing those assets. The clause had clearly been written by someone who either didn't understand trust law or hoped I didn't. I continued reading. There was a cheating clause. If I was unfaithful, Natalie automatically received an additional payout worth millions. If she cheated, nothing. Not a single consequence. Then there was a mandatory mediator listed for future disputes. The mediator happened to be her father's longtime business partner, a man with absolutely no mediation qualifications. By that point, I wasn't angry. I was fascinated. Someone had spent significant time designing a contract that benefited exactly one person, and they expected me to sign it without reading. I closed the folder. The room became very quiet. Natalie smiled nervously. So, I looked directly at her. Did you read this? Of course. All of it? Yes. Then you're aware this contract gives you half of my premarital assets, lifetime support payments, and access to property I don't legally own. Her smile disappeared. Her father immediately jumped in. That's standard protection. No, I replied, it isn't. The silence that followed was deafening. Natalie's mother suddenly became very interested in her wine glass. Her sister looked like she wanted to disappear. I asked Natalie one more question. Who actually wrote this? My father's attorney. That answered everything. I nodded. Did you have your own attorney review it? No. Did anyone explain to you what these clauses actually mean? Her father interrupted again. Enough with the interrogation. I ignored him. Natalie crossed her arms. Her expression hardened. And then she delivered the line they had probably rehearsed beforehand. If you don't trust me enough to sign it, maybe there shouldn't be a wedding. There it was, the ultimatum, the threat, the pressure tactic. Everyone at the table waited for me to surrender. Instead, I took off my engagement ring. I placed it gently on top of the contract. You're right, I said, there shouldn't. The color drained from her face. For a second, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then chaos erupted. Her mother started crying. Her father stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. Natalie stared at me like she'd forgotten how words worked. I simply stood up. Good luck canceling the wedding. Then I left. I spent most of that night sitting in my apartment staring at a wall. Not because I regretted my decision, because I couldn't understand how the woman I planned to marry had become someone I no longer recognized. The next morning, my office received a phone call. The caller introduced himself as Martin Cole, the attorney who had drafted the prenup. I almost laughed. He wanted to know if I was willing to revisit negotiations. I told my assistant to transfer him. The moment he came on the line, he started talking. Apparently, there had been misunderstandings. Apparently, emotions had been running high. Apparently, everyone wanted to resolve things. Then he said something strange. He mentioned that Natalie's sister and brother-in-law had signed a nearly identical agreement years ago. That caught my attention, because the previous night when I'd mentioned the prenup, Natalie's sister looked terrified. Not annoyed, not embarrassed, terrified. I asked the attorney a simple question. Did her sister sign the same trust access clause? The line went silent for several seconds. Then he cleared his throat. I don't believe that's relevant. Which was lawyer language for yes, very relevant. After ending the call, I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I called Natalie's brother-in-law, a quiet guy named Owen. We'd never been particularly close, but I had his number. I asked if he'd like to meet for coffee. He agreed immediately. That afternoon, we sat in a nearly empty cafe. I showed him the prenup. He looked physically ill. Then he told me everything. 5 years earlier, he'd signed a similar agreement before marrying Natalie's sister. Same pressure, same audience, same ultimatum. Sign or lose the wedding. Unlike me, he'd signed. Within 2 years, he had transferred substantial assets into joint ownership. When he later tried to separate finances, the marriage nearly collapsed. According to him, Natalie's parents treated marriage less like a relationship and more like an acquisition strategy. Every son-in-law became a financial target. Every wedding became a business transaction. The prenup wasn't protection. It was the opening move. That conversation ended any lingering doubt I had. The wedding was over. The relationship was over. And for the first time since the dinner, I felt relief. A week later, something unexpected happened. Natalie's sister filed for divorce. Apparently, my refusal to sign had triggered a series of arguments in their family. Questions started getting asked, secrets started coming out. Old resentments surfaced. The perfect image they worked so hard to maintain began cracking. Then collapsing. The last thing I heard was that Natalie's father blamed me for everything. Maybe he still does, but here's the truth. I didn't destroy their family, I just refused to become their next investment. And every time I think about how close I came to signing that document, I remember one thing. The most dangerous contracts aren't the ones filled with legal jargon. They're the ones handed to you by people who claim to love you while daring you not to read them.